Hey everybody, welcome to the Elseworlds Exchange. I am Sal, and I'm joined today by the man who murdered the Justice League unceremoniously. No, very ceremoniously in Justice League 75, the death of the Justice League. No joke, they're dead, and they're never coming back.
Oh yeah, never, never, never. Yeah, I killed them all dead. They'll never come back because it's not comic books. Remember
That's
when Joe
right.
Quesada? Remember when Joe Quesada famously said that dead is dead in
Dead is
comics?
dead.
We all
Well, we got to
believed
bring
it,
that
and then
back.
yeah, we all believed it, and then no one has ever come back. I remember personally when Superman died in Death of Superman, and he has never come back.
Yeah,
Like we've
no,
never had
it's
Superman since then. Yeah,
we could use him, but it's sad. It's sad. It's a
I
really
know.
interesting risk that DC took, but I'm glad to see they're carrying over the noble tradition by
Yeah,
murdering
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and
Batman.
then it sold incredibly well. Like it sold really, really well, and we're going back to second print. We just announced that
Second print.
today. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
it's really exciting. It was pretty rare for us to go to second printing. Certain things have to happen for us to go to second print, but
Mm-hmm.
we're really, really excited. Really
Let me
excited
tell you,
about it.
I
Yeah,
pre-ordered that book based on your we were talking about the book when we were hyping it up the last time you were here. So I called my local comic book, so I pre-ordered the book, and they were like, "Just like 75? Like, why?" And I'm like, "Because it's cool, man. It's gonna be great." And so they do, or at least they say they do. I go to the shop. It's not in my pull list, and it's not on the shelf. It's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
gone. I go to the next shop. It's gone.
yeah.
So I had to buy it on digital like a plebe and just read it like everybody
Oh my
else.
god. Yeah,
But
I had heard from a lot of comic book stores that they were selling out in the comic book stores, and I had heard from a couple of shops they had posted about it. Like one shop had posted. So normally, as you know, we talked about this that normally with social media, all my tweets are scheduled. Usually,
yes,
they're all scheduled. Occasionally, I'll jump in there, but I don't really pay that much attention to it. Like I try
nope,
to I have too much going on to add that other element to my life. It's like I have so
yeah,
much going on in here that it's like adding this whole other beast of a thing over here
of course,
is its own problem.
yep.
Um, and but I was last week. Another writer, actually, we were talking about it, and they were like, "How's it going?" And I was like, "I have no idea. Like I have too much work to do right now, and I'm glad it's out there. I'm glad it's out there. I hope it's selling. Like that's always my goal. Is I want it to sell for retailers. So I'm like, I hope it's selling." And then they were like, "Oh, this one comic store was tweeting about how they sold out, and they had to go and like get copies from their mail order. They had to go borrow copies from their mail order to get them
Oh,
to sell them in the stores because it was so hot in the store and they were selling out. So I was like, "Oh, this is awesome!" And then I started talking to some different stores that I know, and they were like, "Yeah, we're selling like crazy." So it was really, really exciting. And then last week we started talking about doing the second print last week, and so today we announced the second print. We announced that the second print's actually going to be different. It's
oh,
actually going to so this week, depending on when this video airs. So Free Comic Day is coming. And Free Comic Day is a zero issue, and in the zero issue, it has like a short Wally West story. Spoilers, has a cool Wally West story, kind of dealing with the Justice League dying, and you start to get a glimpse of what this new world looks like and what's happening because of these deaths.
yeah.
And it has a preview of Dark Crisis #1, has 7 pages, has some stuff about the multiverse we put in there, and it has a checklist for a lot of what we're doing. Not everything, but a lot of it.
Excellent.
And what we're doing with this, so this week you can go to your comic book store and you can get, the free comic book day special. But with this second printing of Just Like 75, we're actually including the Wally West story in it.
Oh,
So
cool.
it'll be like a bumper. It'll be like a cool, like 2-for-1 kind of thing that you can get as like an extra bonus for getting the second printing. And that's actually going to come out the week before Dark Crisis #1, so it's like perfectly timed. It's like if you want to know what's going on, you want to read this, and you and I talk about this stuff a lot, but it's like at the end of the day, this is my goal: is to get people to go to comic book stores. Like I want you to
Yes.
go to the store and buy these books, and not just buy this book, but buy more comics. I want you to go and always talk about this. Is like some of these big summer blockbuster, like I had this conversation before, but these big like Michael Bay blockbuster summer things. Sometimes the goal is to like get you to go in the store, and we hope buy that. But then you also see other books, like you go
Exactly.
and you look in there and you're like, oh, here's this other DC book that I haven't read before. I'll try that. Or there's this other like awesome creator owned comic that I've never would have heard of before, and I buy that. Like the hope is you just get you back in the store, and that's really
Yeah.
my goal with all this stuff. And
Exactly.
sometimes you got to blow things up to get people to pay attention.
That's very true. No, you got
Kill a bunch of characters.
you gotta be loud. You gotta be loud. You gotta make noise, right? You gotta be
Yeah,
noisy. That was
yeah,
your old adage,
yeah.
right?
We gotta be noisy every once in a while. There's so much going on in comics all the time. There's so much. There's a lot happening all the time right
Yeah,
now,
no,
right?
there,
Yeah, go ahead.
you've got the Death of Justice League. I like to call it like a magnet book, where it just pulls everybody
Yeah,
in and gets you something else. Because like there's Step by Bloody Step, but like there's the Saga's
dude, I'm
back. It just
borrowing that phrase. I'm going to borrow a magnet book. That is an
good, yeah.
awesome phrase. Yeah, I'm
Well,
gonna borrow
uh,
that and tell DC about it. Yeah.
yeah, it's a good sexy hook you can use in your marketing. But
Oh, the
no, it's
magnet book.
true.
Yeah,
Um,
that is cool. We want people to look at the stuff again, and it's like it gets you to talk about the stories. I mean, that's really what my goal is people to talk about the story and talk about and have those debates and have those conversations. I mean, we've talked about this a bit, I think, on throughout the different times we've talked, but it's like, you know, having all these characters die and having a death like this and in a story like this, it brings up all these conversations about what does death mean in comics and
right.
the conversation we're having in the book too. Like there's a scene coming up. We're doing a Road to Dark Crisis special, and there's a scene where John and Nightwing, like John Kent, Superman, and Nightwing are talking, and they're talking about death, and John is upset and like, my dad is dead, Bruce is dead, like he's having all of this, emotion about it, and Nightwing sort of dealing with it in his own way.
Yeah.
He has this moment where he's just like, Nightwing kind of is like, that your dad died, right? Like this has
Yeah,
happened
like
before,
first time.
and yeah, he's like, this has happened before. It'll be okay. And they start having these conversations about what death actually means. Because I talk about this a lot, but I always have this theory about sometimes you have to slow down for a minute in the story and think about what the characters would actually say in these
Yeah.
moments. And sometimes what they would say is also what we would say. Like they've lived in a world where these characters have died and come back. So how does it impact them moving forward? And I wanted to explore some of those ideas here. But that's all this has to lead with, sometimes you gotta be noisy, sometimes you gotta throw a grenade in the room, sometimes you need something, something's gotta happen, because if nothing's
Yeah.
happened, don't talk about these books, it's like, and sadly, sometimes the thing we've noticed that gets people's attention, you know, is death. Like it gets you to sit up for a minute and be like, wait, what's happening? What are you
Yeah.
doing? And that's sometimes what we have to do, and that's what Justice League 75 is, and that's gets people in the door and gets them to go look at the rest of the line and the stuff we're
That's
doing
right.
with Dark Crisis.
Let me
Yeah.
ask you this. I think I know the answer to this, but which death that
Oh,
you
you know me.
executed was the hardest to write? And I think I know exactly what the
Oh,
answer
let me.
is, but
Okay, well, I'm curious. Who do you think it was?
I think it's Ollie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. That was the hardest thing of the whole book. I mean, so for years, whenever I had an opportunity to pitch for DC, like this is back before Flash, before Rebirth, even before New 52, when I was like around and I knew people in editorial and I knew I was doing creator-owned books and mini comics, like I knew people in editorial and I knew other creators. Anytime I was in a room, I was always like, can I write Green Arrow? Like anything with Green Arrow. It was a short story, anything. Like I would always be like Green Arrow, Green Arrow, Green Arrow, Green Arrow. And even when I would get jobs, I was always trying to find a way to sneak Green Arrow in there. Like even when I was doing like Justice League versus Suicide Squad, like Green Arrow was not part of that team, but I'm like, so how do I get Green Arrow in here? Like
Right.
constantly, 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 and I could never do it. And I remember the summer before I got the job on the Flash, like officially got the job that summer before. I remember talking to somebody at DC, one of the executives, and they were like, "What did you pitch to Anne today?" I was like, "Oh, it's not really want to write," and they were like, "Oh, Green Arrow." I was like, "No, it's Flash. I want to write. I'm writing Flash. I really want to write Flash." I pitched them some Flash ideas, and they were like, "Oh, okay, cool, cool." And so this has always been like a thing of me trying to write
Yeah.
Green, and it never works out. I've never been able to get it in there. And so the very first time I really get to write him, like actually really write him, was Justice League 75. So I
Right.
was like, all right, okay. Like I've written him in other couple little things, like tiny bits, and actually because of things with publishing, it's like Green Arrow appeared in Deathstroke #6, but I wrote Justice League 75 before that issue.
Gotcha.
So it was like technically I wrote him before. So yeah, I wanted to make sure that he had the most dialogue, most screen time, and had some heart to the story. And so that was the one that was the hardest. And when Rafa Sandoval started drawing issue 75, which by the way, Rafa just like nails it, right? Like so many
Great
dope
looking
big
book.
moments. Yeah,
Yeah.
he really went for it. He knew what he was doing. He knew how important it was. With he wrote me an email and was like, "Yo, like this is really hard. Hero's my favorite character. Like, oh, dude, I'm right there with you. This is so." It was definitely like an emotional thing for everybody involved working on that particular scene, and you know, there's a lot of surprises and twists coming when it comes to just 675 and the stuff with Dark Crisis. I think people will see that like the story is far from over, and the stuff that happens with Green Arrow in that issue will play up in big ways later. And you know, as you and I were talking about before we started recording, it's like sometimes I have to remind myself that like I'm at the end of the book.
Right.
Like I've already read the book. Like
Yeah.
if the Justice League, you know, Death of Justice League, Dark Crisis saga, I'm at the end of the book. I'm like the only person that has read the whole book at this point,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone else is just in the first chapter. And so all their reactions, sometimes I have to remind myself of that because I'll get these reactions and people are like upset about something, and I'm like, why are you so worried about that? And it's like,
Right.
oh, because you're in the first chapter. I'm at the end. So
Yeah.
it'll be really interesting to see when people see the big tapestry of it. Like, you know, I've noticed there's a lot of like misconceptions about the book, not just 75, but Dark Crisis.
Yeah.
Like people think they think it's about certain things, and it's like you're only gonna really get the full story of what it's actually about by reading it, you know? Like
Mm-hmm.
and we can talk about all this stuff, but it's like that's really the meat of it to read it. But like today we also announced we're doing a bunch of Dark Crisis Worlds Without Justice League books.
Yep.
Uh, we had previously had already announced that Tom King and Chris Burnham were doing one about Superman. It's about, you know, Clark with John Kent. This information's already out there, so I'm not really spoiling anything. But
Okay.
this one in particular is about a world in which Clark gets to see John's teenage years. And you know, Tom King did this amazing story about that because that was something that was taken away from Clark, and so we're giving it back to Clark in this very emotional issue. And Burnham is just knocking out of the park. There's pages in there where like it's so cool looking. It's so funny. Like there's a page where it's Superman and John, and they're fighting a giant robot, and it's like I know we've seen Superman fighting a giant robot, but in this case with Burnham, it's just like it's so much fun. The backup in that one is an Aquaman backup by Brandon Thomas, and I'm gonna mispronounce his name, but I think it's Fico Ossio. Um,
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm just as bad. So I
I know
couldn't help you.
I'm mispronouncing those names here. We're doing a Green Lantern one. That's Philip Kennedy Johnson. That one's awesome. I think we're going to show some covers from that one pretty soon with
Nice.
Fernando Blanco. There's a Hawk Girl backup that's done by Nadia Shamus and Jack Herbert. That's really cool. We're doing a Wonder Woman one that's Teeny Howard and Lila Del Duca. She had done a Shutter with Joe Keating years ago, which is an awesome looking book and was one of my favorite books for a while. We're
Yeah.
doing a Martian Manhunter backup by Dan Waters and Brandon Peterson. Let me tell you something,
Nice.
like that was one of the ones I was really excited about because I was like, dude, Dan Waters doing Martian Manhunter. Like, you know that shit's gonna be super weird and fun.
Yeah.
And he just really like he just goes for it. It's so much fun. Then we're doing a Green Arrow one. It's a Green Arrow Black Canary one, and it's with Stephanie Phillips and Clayton Henry. And then the backup on that one is Dennis Culver and Nick Varela, who's awesome. Her art is really cool. That one is a lot of fun. Then we're doing a Batman one that is Cy Spurrier and Ryan Sook.
Oh my
Like
god.
it is so cool. The stuff that Ryan Sook is turning in is amazing. Like when people start seeing that art that Ryan is making, they're gonna
Yeah.
flip out. And then we have a Zatanna one that is Megan Fritz Martin and Rebecca Isaacs, which to me is
Ooh.
like really exciting. I've been a fan of Rebecca's for a long time. I'm just like this stuff. So we have all these really cool stuff that's coming with Dark Crisis. You know, we're doing a the Flash crossover we're doing, which is super important. And then we're doing a Young Justice storyline, which ends up showing you what's going on with that generation of characters and how this is impacting them differently than like the Titans or the newer characters.
Dope.
It's a lot of stuff. Like it's a lot. There's a lot coming, and it's been really exciting. And it all starts with that 75 issue. So I'm glad we're doing a second printing because I think people are going to start being like, oh wait, this actually matters. I got to read this thing. So I'm hoping that we get it out there and people get, you know, pumped up about it. Like that's really my goals with this stuff. But yeah, those
Yeah,
one shots
man.
are gonna be really cool. Yeah, I think we're gonna start showing some of the art for some of it next week. So yeah, it's gonna be really exciting.
I will say those one shots are exciting, and it reminds me of an event that has another DC event that had some really strong one shots where
Hmm.
it's like, oh man, sometimes the one shots actually ended up overshadowing the story, which was Convergence.
Oh yeah, there's some really cool Convergence ones. Yeah, I
That's the
thought you
thing,
were gonna
like
say
there's a
Death Metal.
ton. No, no, I was not going to say death metal, but death metal has its own strengths.
Yeah,
One might
yeah. Well,
say.
I think with Death Metal, with that one in particular, Scott, James, and I worked really hard to make sure that all the one shots had value, that they
Yes,
weren't just like
absolutely,
throwaways, and that was the thing here. We wanted to make sure these all had value and that they all, they're important to what we're doing.
exactly.
The stuff that's going on with these one shots are very important to the story we're telling with Dark
Yeah,
Crisis. So you kind of have to check them all out to get
right.
the big picture of what's going to be happening in Dark
But based
Crisis.
based on the creative teams for each of these issues, like you're getting something that's like it's part of the larger tapestry, but it also has its own it has its own identity. So you're like, oh,
Yeah,
like if you focus on one or two particular characters, like you're gonna get like this whole kind of concept for each of these characters.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You could read them by themselves. That was part of the goal with it too, is that you could read one by itself and get its own story. But then when you look at it in the context of Dark Crisis, it means something else. And
Yeah.
some of those pieces, without getting, I have to be careful. I can get like too lost in a spoiler sometimes.
Uh
I'm
huh.
like, what's out? I'm like, oh my god, issue one hasn't even come out yet, so I can't talk about a lot of stuff. But when you start seeing how these pieces come together,
Yeah.
it all adds up to something really special. And you know, you have to get there. I think when we get there, people start to see it all. You're gonna be like, oh, this all adds up to this. And as we get further into the event, I think people will start seeing why all these things matter and get to see how cool this stuff we're building is.
Exactly. You had teased last time you were here about
Mhm.
Pariah and how you were kind of like
Yeah.
you justice for Pariah kind of thing.
Hmm.
And Pariah's become like this kind of it's funny to see like the big bad. I mean, I don't know. Can we talk about that? Like I like Pariah
Yeah, we can
seems
talk
to
about
be like
Mariah
front,
in '75. Yeah.
he seems to be like front and center as far as like the major
Yeah, I
antagonist.
think it's funny how the Great Darkness plays a really important part of all of this.
Yeah,
But the Great Darkness is being controlled by Pariah, or Pariah's trying.
exactly.
Pariah thinks he can control this force. I mean, it's important to know that like the Great Darkness is not a thing of good or evil. It just is, and like we can get all the theoretical like stuff about what the Great Darkness is, and we can have all kinds of conversations about that. But it's not
Yeah,
an evil thing. It's not a he or a her. It's nothing. It's this thing that just exists constantly, right?
right.
Like, um, have you seen the movie Babadook?
No, I've not seen
All right,
Babadook.
then we're not gonna talk about that. But okay, so
Okay.
but it's this thing that exists and it's not going to just go away,
Okay.
right? Not gonna just it's not a thing and there's a scene in '75 where they talk about this, where
Yeah.
it's like Doctor Multiverse is like, it is not a thing that you fight. It's
Right.
not a thing that you go in punching. There's no giant like Great Darkness dragon that's coming. It
Right.
isn't what it is, right? So Pariah is manipulating this in hopes that he can get what he wants,
Right.
and that's a big part of '75. And that's why in '75 there's no scene where the Great Darkness is like talking or anything. Like we don't
No.
really have like a lot of that. It's all through Pariah, and it's Pariah's interpretation of this force. Pariah, like we talked about this before, where it's like in Christ and Infinite Earths, it shows that Pariah kind of didn't care about the people of his world. Like he had wife
Right.
and kids there, but he almost didn't care about them. It was a formality, right? It was like, this is what you do. You have wife and kids. You do that, but he didn't necessarily care about them. He didn't care about the people. And he talks about this
No.
throughout those stories where he's just kind of like, I don't really care about all this. All I care about is knowledge. All I care about is the secrets to the universe. And then he learns the
Yeah.
secrets of the multiverse, and then that unleashes the Anti-Monitor. But it destroys his world. And when it destroys his world, he survives because he was in his like machine when it happened. He was in this like chamber. But then he got trapped in limbo for thousands of years. Like he is stuck in the dark for thousands of years until the Monitor comes and gets him and then curses him, doesn't save him. And also, annoyingly, doesn't explain why he's cursing him, but curses him to have these powers to be immortal, right?
Yeah.
Like that's why Black Adam comes over and starts punching him, and he's just
Right.
like, "Dude, I survived the death of infinite worlds. Like
Yeah.
you punching me in the face is nothing. Like what is this? Like." And But he's given these gifts, he's given these powers, and one of the main powers is that he is constantly tortured by being taken to worlds when they're in a crisis, and have being forced to watch that world die. And this happens for infinite worlds, and to the point where we get down to one, right?
Yeah.
How many worlds? I mean, it sounds silly. It's a rhetorical question, right? Like, how many worlds? Well, infinite. That means
Yeah.
he was going from world to world to world
Right. Until it
for
stops. Like,
thousands
it's
of
just,
years.
yeah, exactly.
What does that do to someone?
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's that scene in Christ in the First where he's watching them, and he's like, "I wish I could help them. I wish I could do anything." Why? But he's also like, "Why are they running?
Right.
Like, don't they know what I know? There's no place
Yeah.
to run. Like, this is it. You're gonna be swallowed by the dark." And I wanted to show what that character is like. Um, and it's funny, I saw somebody one time they did an article about how like I had turned Pariah into this, and I'm like, no, no, no. Marv Wolfman did, because if you go back,
Yes.
there was a crossover. Well, not only with Christ and First, but there was a crossover with War of the Gods written by Marv Wolfman, where he talks about
War of the
this.
Gods.
And
Yeah.
Pariah literally is like, here, I'll read it to you if I can. He basically, I have it saved just because I found this to be so fascinating that this person had gone through these experiences and we never talk about it again.
Yep.
Like, they just never came up again, and that always kind of bugged me. I'm like, we should do more with this character. And it's like I've always
Totally.
been kind of trying to push to get Pariah back somehow. Like, every time I could, I was like, well,
You
we
should
should get
try it.
Pariah. Yeah, we should use Pariah. Yeah, so in this issue, he's just like, he literally is coming about like, death is coming. He's like, I want to end my curse, free me from my destiny. And he even talks about like, do you see it coming through the darkness? It is the end of everything. And this is a long time ago. It's not now. But then
No.
he's just like, what does he say right here? He literally is like, the peace I have for so long craved is finally at hand. Because of my sins, I must always be at the moment of complete destruction. This is the moment why I was summoned here. And then later on at the end of the event, there's like a little coda with him, and it's like, and poor Pariah, who gave up his one chance in his tortures so that more futures can live and die. It isn't fair. Like, that's Mark Wolfman. So it's like, yo, like, this has been built into this character the whole time. That he was
Totally.
like, this, the only way to end his suffering is for this world to be destroyed. Like, it's the last one.
Yeah.
Uh, but he's been suffering this whole time. And now he's like, wait, 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 wait. What if I fix it? Like, what if I bring back what was taken? Um, and he kind of thinks the only way to do that is he's taking a risk. He's like, I can manipulate the great darkness, build this army, all to destroy this earth. And
Yeah.
if I destroy this earth, then I can get everything back. This is it.
Yeah.
Like, he's taken, it's his last shot to end his curse. And he doesn't care if I think his attitude is a little bit like, well, if I die in the process, like, it's a win, no matter what, it's a win for him. And
Well, he
so
wants
that's,
to die. Like, there's
yeah, he wants to die. Yeah.
my wife Tiffany covered War of the Gods in a big bad way and did all this like this huge episode about it. And he's become her least favorite character. She hates Pariah because he's such a whiner. Because
Dude,
in
I have heard that
every
from so
page
many
he's like,
people.
I've suffered though. Like, don't there's a contingent in War of the
Yeah.
Gods of heroes that are dedicated to just keeping Pariah from helping Hecate destroy the earth. Because
Dude, yes.
he will, and that's actually one of the coolest moments in the book is when it's like Pariah's laughing.
Yeah. Dude, let me tell you, she is far from the first person to be like, I hate Pariah.
Hi,
He's too
Pariah,
whiny.
man.
I have
Yeah.
heard this for years because, I would bring Pariah up a lot. Like, we would have these meetings about events and stuff, and I would just be like, "Where's Pariah?" Like,
Yeah, he
because
should
I'm
be like
like,
the
if this is,
anti-watcher, where it's like when Watcher shows up to watch things, it's like Pariah show up to just have to watch it and be like,
yeah, he's just like,
"Ugh."
"Oh, this is the end." Because what the Watcher is like, "Oh, this is a major moment." That
Yes,
is the Watcher. This is like, "Oh, if I'm here, that means people are dying." Like,
right.
but so he's always, he always had this reputation, I think, among a lot of people that, like, yeah, he's a whiner or a crier or whatever. And so
Yeah,
I have,
you've
every
kind
time
of
he would
like
come up,
grown him
like,
up. Yeah,
yeah, I'd be like, Pariah, Pariah, Pariah. And then finally it worked out.
yeah,
It was the right timing, and I think it made sense for the story. Especially if we're going back to a lot of the elements from the original Christ of Earth and picking up some of those pieces that were left. And he's one of the major ones. And it's like, I know with Infinite Crisis, they went down the same path with Alexander Luthor and with Superboy Prime and what they wanted. But I feel like what they wanted was different from what he wanted, because they were just like, we want our worlds back, or we want
yeah.
a perfect world. and he's kind of like, no, I want it all back. Like, how do I do that? And
Well, and he
it
doesn't even
gets
really like
go ahead.
he doesn't even really miss his wife and children. Like says it, but like when he had them, he neglected them and ignored them.
I said them,
And it's
yeah,
like so for him, he's just like, I mean, I at the end of the day, if you get what you want, you'll probably just end up going back to your old ways.
he's
Although
a
as you
selfish
pointed out,
person.
he's a selfish
Yeah,
person. Exactly,
he's a selfish
exactly.
person. Yeah, in Phil Kennedy Johnson does the story in the but also Phil Kennedy Johnson is like awesome at
Yeah,
like big mythology and world building, and you look at the stuff that he's doing with action and how great the stuff over his action is, and he did again, like when we were talking about the one shots, like me at Tora, we kept talking about the different writers and what we got excited about them doing. So like Dan Waters doing Martian Manhunter, we were like, that's really exciting. Cy Spurrier doing this Batman story, that's really exciting. We were trying to figure out who was gonna do the Pariah short. I immediately was like, oh, it's gotta be Philip. I feel like Philip will understand this character really well, and that's what Philip's story is about Pariah kind of roaming Earth, waiting for the next crisis, but also being like, I want this all to end,
yeah.
and then being called away. And without getting too much spoilers, but stuff happens.
Right.
Like you start realizing
Oh, good.
what's going on, and how it starts to impact what we did with 75 and what's going on with Dark Crisis. But yeah,
Yeah.
I love Pariah. I don't really see him as a whiny character, I guess. I feel like
He's not in this book. Like and what's funny is
no,
in Justice League 75, like he is a formidable opponent and he is like a
yeah.
force to be reckoned with, but you still get like pariah moments. Like him saying I've suffered it's in his DNA and he says it
Yeah,
in Dark
yeah.
he says it in Justice League 75, but it's so
Well,
funny
now
to
he's
see like
pissed.
now he's
Because
pissed. Like
before,
it's
yeah,
turned
before he
from
was sad, now
sorrow
he's
to
pissed.
anger, right? Like
Yeah, yeah. Before he was sad, now he's pissed off, and I think that's what I was trying to do differently with him. It was to be like,
yeah.
when does he in his grieving of
Right.
the,
What stage is he at?
yeah, and now he's in anger. So he's like, okay, well now he's pissed off. So, but also he's kind of like, well, I think I know best. I think I
Right.
know how to fix this, and I think he knows how to not only manipulate the Great Darkness, or he believes he does, and
Yeah.
also how to manipulate the multiverse. But he also has other plans that we will reveal over Dark Crisis of like, this is
Nice.
how I'm going to fix this, and this is how I'm
Okay.
going to get what I want. And yeah, without getting too into spoilers, like that's and all of that is very like, but there's also a little bit of like that anger comes from just let me do it. If you let me
Yeah.
do it, you will see this is better.
Yeah.
He, he's very like, listen, if I kill you, I promise you, your death will be worth something.
Right.
Which
And
is the
it's
whole
like that's
thing about
hard to
how we were talking
convince.
before. Well, there's a lot of people who are like, well, death is meaningless in comics, and that's part of Pariah's argument. Is like, yes, let me figure out how to make your death mean something,
Yeah.
and that's part of his thing. And he kind of hints at that a little bit, where he's like, you'll be happy, and this is important. Like we said it at Infinite Frontier, and then he talks about it in 75. Like, I can make your death mean something, and that's a part of, again, the narrative of the whole thing that we're doing.
Yeah. The Dark Army, just
Yes.
because it's like on one level I can understand Pariah's selection process, but on the other, it's also just a juicy opportunity to show like some of the biggest bads in the DC universe all just laying waste of
Yeah.
Justice League. And it's
The
just
two
a
big
an
spread them
action
all
figure
together.
moment.
What's that?
Yeah.
Oh, action figures? Well, yeah. I mean,
It's so rare to get to see you never see them all together in one
no, no,
place.
no. And I wanted to do that. I mean, there's a part of me that's just selfish. I'm the selfish one in that instance where I'm like, I just want to have a really cool image, and I want to put
Yeah.
these characters together. So how do I get us here? And
Right.
you know, I was really selective of who we put in that group, and it really was people who had been parts of major events.
Yeah.
It's like, um, I wanted to find a home for like Alexander Luthor or a home for Superboy Prime, but I do feel like, Jeff and Scott like gave Superboy Prime a happy ending during
They
Death
kind of
Metal. And I
did,
was like,
right? Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, let the boy rest. Let him have his happy ending. We don't need to
Yeah.
mess. Let him be happy.
We got plenty of other characters like Neron.
But Neron, hey, listen, I love
Underworld
Underworld
Unleashed.
Unleashed. So I was like, I mean, every time we've had these conversations, I'm always like, yo, what about Underworld Unleashed? Because I love Underworld Unleashed. Underworld Unleashed is actually a super important event. You
Yes.
get Smart Blockbuster from that event,
Yep.
and you get Lex back. Like, people
Yeah.
forget Lex was not the Lex we have now came from Underworld Unleashed. Like before that, he'd been dead. Like
Yeah.
you had all this stuff where you had the John Byrne version, and then you had the son,
The
the
clone.
illegitimate son with the long hair, yeah, the clone. Um, Somebody recently called him the son from Australia, and I had totally forgot that.
He's
And so I
Australian.
went back,
Yeah.
yeah, I went back and I read it, and I was like, oh, that's right. Um, but the Lex Luthor we have now came from Underworld Unleashed, and there's a ton of other pieces of what we have of current DCU, or I think the stuff people loved from like the stuff that you loved from JLA.
Yep.
A lot of those things were built because Underworld Unleashed came out before JLA,
Yes,
and
it
that
did.
was like Howard Porter getting leveled up before JLA, and it's like you have all of these major DC pieces that came out of Underworld Unleashed. I love that event, and so that's why Neuron is in there because I'm like, this person is important, and he's supposed to be the devil,
He's
so I'm
the
kind of
devil.
like, shouldn't we put him in here? And we should have a place for him. Like,
Right? I
you know,
mean,
you can
there's
argue about the mythology of DC and whether he's the devil or not, but I'm like,
3
yo,
devils in the DC universe. You're
yeah,
fine.
yeah, we're fine. Let's put Neuron in here. You know, he's a shapeshifter. Like, let's get him in here. Let's get him in here. You know,
Yeah.
it's also where
Mhm.
my love of the Trickster came from. Was because of
Oh,
that
sure,
story.
yeah. He got
You
souped
know,
up, and he's the protagonist of that story.
I know it's so weird. It's so
Yeah.
weird, but it's awesome. So that's Underworld Unleashed, and then Necron. You know, I think when you're doing a story
Blackest
about the
Night.
darkness and Blackest Night, you got to
Good
have
idea.
Necron in there, and then obviously Darkseid and the Empty Hand and Upside Down Man with his connections. That came out of conversations I had with like Rom V and with James about the Upside Down Man and being like, oh, it's hinted that he either is or connected or a piece of the Great Darkness. So I'm like, oh, you have to have him here then.
That's
So we had some
awesome.
conversations about how to make that stuff add up and work, and we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of moving pieces to this. But we just really went in there, and I was like, okay, I want all the people. Like it was Empty Handed for Multiversity. Um, I wanted to get a few others, but it became unruly at some point.
Yeah, because I
you
noticed,
know,
one of the big, things that I noticed online, some of the chatter was like, everybody pretty much gets a compliment. There's no Bat compliment. Was the Batman Who Laughs going to be in this or not?
no, no.
Okay.
I feel like that has also had its time, and we should let that character rest. I've written a lot of Batman Who Laughs, so we did a lot with Batman Who
We
Laughs,
have
and because
indeed,
Batman
yeah.
Who Laughs is so much a part of, the bridge between metal and death metal.
Yeah.
Uh, that's a few years of DC storytelling, and the Batman Who Laughs was a major, major piece of that. Because remember, he's not even the main villain of
No,
metal,
that's
but
right.
he becomes the main villain of death metal.
Death metal.
And so he in particular, I kind of was like, no, 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 let's put him away for a bit, and he does not show up. I can make that promise. Batman Who
Okay.
Laughs come into the story at all. Don't get me wrong, because you and I've talked before. It's like the Batman Who Laughs is like a license to print money.
Yeah.
Like every time we put him in something or a cover or whatever, he would sell so much. Like that Batman Who Laughs is a crazy moneymaker. And so to me, I was like, no, I can't do it. And also it makes sense for the story. That is a good point. I did think about that with where would I put a Batman villain in this story, and like could he be part of this army? And then I decided not to. There are other things that will come up later in Dark Crisis to kind of get into that a little bit.
Mhm.
But in this particular instance, 75, um, I didn't want him I didn't want any Batman villains to be in this particular grouping.
But it was a
But
deliberate like, you were like, "No Bat." Like, just, like, big heavy hitters.
yeah, well, also you look at like Batman's stories outside of like say Final Crisis when he goes against
They're
Darkseid.
not yeah, they're not like the kind of
You know,
world-ending kinda thing. It's
well,
not
also I
like,
was
he doesn't
killing.
fight the devil. Like
Yeah, yeah, and I was killing Ra's al Ghul already, so I was like,
Yeah,
but
okay.
there are like it's so funny with all of this. Like I put a lot of clues in my work of what's coming. Like, and sometimes it's throwaway lines, sometimes it's something in the background, sometimes a single panel image.
Yeah.
That if you when you get to the end and you go back and you look at all, you're gonna be like, oh, he was telling us what was going on the whole time.
Yeah.
And every once in a while there'll be like a throwaway line of dialogue, and that throwaway line of
Seemingly.
dialogue, yeah, seemingly. But then it's like, oh, that's important over here. Like it's funny, people will be like, well, wouldn't this character do this in this instance? And you're like, yeah, just wait. Like just wait a minute. Like,
Right.
gotta get there. We gotta get there. I wish that Justice League 75 could have been longer sometime. There's a lot of stuff I wanted to put in there. We just ran out of room
It
for it,
reads fast.
It reads fast, dude. I wish I could have had a lot more in there. I mean, I wish I'd given more of the characters some bigger scenes, but uh, I just say keep reading because
That moment, man.
yeah.
So it blew me away. I was because I was waiting for it. You were talking earlier on another
Mhm.
show about how all these death scenes were really like heart wrenching to write, and I know that
Yeah.
it was hard to draw because it was like killing your favorite characters. But then you get to the Trinity, and
Yeah.
you Barry Allen them.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
So for me, I was like,
I needed it to be clear
it's
with them
very
particular,
that they are. Yeah, okay.
right? Because it's like, the Spectre kills John Stewart,
All
right? Or
right.
he at least knocks down John Stewart because John Stewart, if you're reading Green Lantern, what Jeffrey Thorne is doing, this like great Green Lantern book, he had this ending where John Stewart had gotten these new powers as part of the Godstorm. So
Godstorm.
I knew that I needed somebody big to knock him down. So I'm
Right.
like, okay, it makes sense for the Spectre to be the one to knock him down. And then we had the scene with Doomsday, which was a moment where I wanted you to feel like, oh, maybe they'll make it out of this. But there's no spoilers here. I mean, you knew on the cover what you were getting. Like,
It's a
I think people
cover.
were
It's
kind of surprised. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So Green Arrow gets taken out by Doomsday, and then I needed it to be clear with those three particularly because if any of those three made it out, I think it would have lost the impact. And so I just
Yeah.
needed it to be very, very clear that those three were the three that got taken out, and that's why we Barry Allen them, which in of itself is a clue, but that's a whole other conversation.
But it was cool to see because it also tells
Mhm,
you like what we're looking at. We're watching
mhm.
like a crisis happening.
Yeah,
Um, it's the
yeah.
first time I've seen that effect since Crisis.
Yeah, I that's funny because I tried to get that into stuff before.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, there was a scene in Flash Year 1. I had this scene that was supposed to be that in reverse, and it just didn't work
Oh.
out. Uh, so with Rafa, with this scene, we talked about it a lot, went back and forth on the breath because I was like, I want you to do this, but I want you to still find a way to make your twist on it.
Right.
Make it Rafa's. And we went back and forth on that. Rafa did that awesome splash, and we were like, "Yeah, this is great. This nails it. It's such a cool, big moment." And again, it's a two-page spread. We wanted to make sure it was clear what was happening.
Right.
But again, that visual is supposed to clue you into certain things. It is supposed to kind of hit those nostalgia buttons in a way.
Sure. Of course.
But I think it also, again, it sort of gives you an idea of what's happening, but it also made the scene a bit more serious. I think when that happened.
Yeah, well, it also tells you, like, what the stakes are, I think, where you're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I am bearing witness to a crisis right now." Even
Yeah.
if that's the
Yeah.
first and only time we've ever actually seen that effect. And I remember, like, thinking I think when we covered it one time, I was like, "Well, and obviously this effect of Barry, melting into skeletons, is him going into the Speed Force." Because, of
Mhm.
course, like, that is kind of the explanation. I doubt the Trinity is going into the Speed Force.
No, no. But, what's funny is that when you think of the original intent, like, when they made that scene
They
back
were
in
killing
Crisis,
him.
they were killing him,
Yeah.
so there was no plan. I mean, you're talking about like, Barry was dead for a long time,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, even when you think about, like, Return of Barry Allen, which I think is, like, 92, 93,
Yeah,
it's
like
it's
yeah, around then,
around
right?
there.
Like 94, like it's early 90s,
I
yeah.
don't think it's 94. I don't think it's 94. It's gotta be so because here's the thing, it's in that same time period as, like, Superman 100. Oh, maybe you're right, maybe it's 94.
Because
Maybe it's
it's way
94
yeah, I
because
think
because okay. No, I think it is 93 because or I would get,
think
like,
you're right.
nerdy on you for a moment. Alright, so Superman dies in
Superman dies
75,
in that yes,
right? But Clark Kent dies in 100, and there's this
right.
cover that is, like, Death of Clark Kent on issue 100. Okay.
Yeah,
I would take that math. That happened probably in 94.
right.
And you look at Flash 100 that came out around the same time, and that
Mhm.
was the storyline with him versus Cobra. And so Flash 100 had the same kind of cover. Return of Barry Allen starts in what 76, like 75, 76, and it ends in 79. And then
Yeah,
80 is the beginning of like Wally and the new costume, and that's like him finally running out of the shadows. So you're talking about 20 issues
yeah.
before. So it probably is like end of 92,
I think you're
early 90.
right. Yeah, I
Somebody
can't argue
listening
with
to this is gonna look it up or they know it. They
well,
just
they could
know
just
it.
Google it.
Yeah, yeah. One time I was talking to Mark Wade. This is like maybe a month ago, and we were talking about some like bigger DC plans, and we were talking about Wally, and we were talking about Wally's costume, and on the call, I was like, oh, like Flash 80. And it was this kind of weird moment where I'm like, I'm telling Mark Waid, who has like a perfect memory of all comics,
Does, yeah.
when something that he wrote happened,
Right.
like, so one of those things I was kind of just laughing at myself about it, because it's like, of course, Mark Waid remembers books he didn't write that came out before he was born. Of course, he's gonna remember the
Right.
book that he worked on. That was a major cool thing that he did. But
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's gonna be interesting. The different reactions I've seen from people, and it's like, the people who believe and they don't in our
Oh yeah.
world. And that's why we play with those ideas in Dark Crisis, that some people believe and some don't. And I try to play with all those ideas in these books, and it's been really exciting.
Yeah, it reminds me of when Batman died, and like Tim was the only one who was like, "No,
Yeah,
no."
yeah,
Is there or okay? So here you want to get nerdy. You remember
yeah,
that? Remember that TGIF crossover where Mickey Mouse disappears and he goes into all those different shows like Family Ties and stuff.
yeah,
And the
yeah.
only one who doesn't believe him and knows who he is and find him is Roger Rabbit. Who's the Roger Rabbit in your in the Dark Crisis?
Oh my gosh, dude, his name is Hal Jordan.
That he has that moment that you talked about, I think, in this issue where he's like, bullshit.
Oh, it's an issue one. Yeah, an
Is it
issue
issue
one.
one? Because I saw the
Yeah,
preview
issue one.
pages.
Black Adam tells him. So in issue one, Black Adam. We're getting deep into spoilers here, folks. But basically, in issue one, Black Adam is like, here's what happened. Which, by the way, if you read 75, Black Adam is the survivor, and he comes back and is like, Justice League is dead. So in
Yeah.
issue one of Dark Crisis, he's already told everybody, and
Yeah.
everyone's dealing with it. But Hal Jordan has been off on this mission, so Hal Jordan comes back. We see a little bit of it in the Road to Dark Crisis special, because he finds out from Jackson. Like, Jackson is the first one to be like, Justice League are gone, and he's like, no. He goes to Black Adam. Black Adam tells him the whole thing, and then Hal is just like, bullshit, bullshit. And then he says to Wally, he's just kind of like there's a whole scene with him, Wally, and Sean where they're debating what they're gonna do, and then Hal is kind of like, well, I'm gonna go find out what really happened. Wally, you are gonna go find Barry and go find Barry,
Yeah.
which that's what happens in the Flash book, is about about Wally and the Flash family trying to find Barry Allen.
Yeah.
But Hal's the one that is like, no, we're gonna find out what really happened, and he's the one that takes off to go look for the Dark Army, because he's like, well, I mean, Hal's the one that is like, listen, if somebody,
Can
he has this
control these
moment where he's
guys.
like, what is, he says he says to Wally, like, what would Barry do? And he's like,
Oh.
well, Barry would look for the evidence. He'd go to the crime scene. He's like, all right, so here's what we're gonna do. And he basically explains, like, well, then if there is this Dark Army out there, if Pariah is out there with this army, that means they're still out there possibly. So I have to go find them. And Hal goes on an adventure, and there's a lot more pieces. I'm worried if I talk too much about, I'll end up spoiling all the really
Totally.
stuff that's coming with Hal, and Wally. Like, it was the three of them go in different directions. It's like Hal goes this way, Wally goes this way, and then John goes another way, and then John runs into his own troubles,
Nice.
trying to be the caretaker of Earth while everyone else is trying to figure out what's going on. And then that leads to a lot of big fun and big problems. And we revealed some of it. I mean, because we have the cover to issue 2, Dark Crisis, is already out there, and it has Deathstroke versus Nightwing, which we start to explain some of that stuff. And then we have
Yeah.
John fighting Cyborg Superman, and that scene
That's
is
awesome.
brutal. It is mean. All the stuff with the two of them is mean, but they yeah, so we revealed that cover already in issue 2 that has we've already shown some of the art, the Deathstroke versus Nightwing stuff. Because, I mean, we've been, like, if you look at Infinite Frontier and Justice League Incarnate, that was building the multiverse threat. That was building the Pariah danger,
Yeah.
with this Dark Army. But then I wanted to create an army on the ground. I wanted to create a problem on the ground. And that's where
Mm.
Batman, Robin, Deathstroke, like, that story I was telling there, that is now in Shadow War, and that leads to Shadow War Omega. Which Shadow War Omega is really important because it leads directly into Dark Crisis. And I mean, literally, the ending is like, go read Dark Crisis, because it just goes right into it. And
Cool.
you get to see what Deathstroke's up to. And part of Deathstroke's thing is like, if the Justice League are gone, it's time to party. And, like, a lot of
Yeah.
villains have that same attitude. And it's like, if you're Deathstroke, what's the first thing you go after? Those
Yeah.
cheating fucking
So
Titans.
so goddamn Titans I've been dealing with forever. Yeah.
and so what does that mean, and like how does that cause problems? And you have John over here trying to figure something out, and it just becomes this. It's a very tense, dangerous time in the DCU, and you get to see why the Justice League, matter. And
Right.
so there's a lot of stuff going on, but yeah, we have that covered. Issue 2 is already out there, so it's not like I'm spoiling that part, but it's a lot of fun. There's more coming. Like I think I said next week we're gonna reveal the cover issue 3. We're gonna reveal some covers to issue 3, and I think people will start being like, "Wait, what is this about?" Like,
Yeah.
because it's like you're gonna really start seeing the pieces come together of what
Oh
is
yeah.
actually happening and how all of these pieces that we've been building start coming together. It's really interesting with comics now because it's like, and I know I said this before, it's all about you have to read the books, you have to read the books, you have to read the books, but it's so much about like fans now, they pay attention to all of it, like covers, solicits, there is stuff online, interviews, like what we're doing right now, talking about it's all part of the experience of the comic.
Yep.
And so I'm always trying to be careful how much I reveal, but I do think it's all part of that experience. And my hope is that all of these pieces make you go buy the book. It's like I
Yeah.
want you to go buy it and enjoy it and see this crazy story we're telling in the DCU. But yeah, it's gonna be really interesting. I think there's a lot of fun stuff coming, and like we just revealed those one shots. It's gonna be, I don't know, it's a lot, but
Yeah.
I'm curious. I think it'll be really fun once we get through all of it. People will see the coolness of it all.
Definitely. I think that we're in an interesting place right now with comics, like you said, and like there is this, you know, you have two audiences. You have the old guard and the new readers, and
Yeah.
the old guard has seen it, done it, been there, done that, and they're also typically the most vocal. And so but because of the expectations and the catering to the new, there's this kind of like noise, and it's not like being noisy and selling books. This is more like
Mhm.
just the white noise that erupts from the conversation about stuff like this, which is just pure unadulterated, like big two, let's have some fun comic books. And
Yeah.
as a result, like I think there's some like there's some muddling of the conversation regarding what Dark Crisis is or where it's heading, and there's some expectations. And I think it's compounded by just the overall online chatter and expectations. And I was testing that theory about 3 months ago. I pulled a
Mhm.
poll on this channel
Oh,
where
yeah.
I was like, DC announces the death of Justice League. Which hero is likely to be the lone survivor?
And everyone picked Batman, right?
Batman's 58% out of 3,000 votes.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And 80 comments all being like, well, obviously they're not going to kill Batman. They can't kill their cash cow. Like, there is still this expectation that, like, that like, oh, well, they're not going to touch this. This is precious. This isn't going to work. They're not going to, like,
Yeah.
this is this like outthinking the publisher kind of thing. And it's like, hey, you were wrong, man.
Oh,
You
you gotta
need,
read it. Well, it's funny you say that because I do think one of the things about Dark Crisis
yeah,
is, and all of those conversations matter, right?
yeah.
Like all of these conversations matter. The newer audience and the older audience. I don't like calling them that, but the audience that have been reading maybe longer.
Yeah, I like. I'm trying to think
Like,
of something like the classic audience, but I don't know. There's got to be another term.
well, that's how I see the characters, right? Like all of those conversations do matter, and it's like this is part of what the story is about. Like, it's not about replacing anybody, right? Like,
Right,
it's not about replacing anybody. It's not about old versus new. It's not. It is about how all of these pieces matter, right?
right.
Like, to me, when DC works the best is when we are doing new stuff, but we are honoring the classic. When we have those pieces, I think, the generational history, the sidekicks, the legacy characters, when all those parts are together, that is when DC Comics works its best. And that is a large part of what Dark Crisis is actually about, is that
Yeah,
once you have all of these characters, you have the JSA and the Titans and the Justice League and the Teen Titans, and you have all these newer characters, and you can go back and look at older characters, like, when all those pieces are working together, they're unstoppable. And to me, that's what Dark Crisis is about. It's about showing that. It's about showing all of those parts together. It isn't about replacing anybody. It isn't about like, shoving anything to the side or this character doesn't matter, or this character is more than this character. It's like when they're all working together, they can stop anything. And that's really what Dark Crisis is to me. And that's the kind of message I'm trying to get out there with it. And I think that will come through when you're reading it, that it's like all of these parts together is when DC Comics works its best. Like to me, my favorite eras of DC were when those parts were all together. You look at the stuff in the early 2000s, late 90s, where it was like there was a JSA book, there was like more than one JSA book because you also had like Classified, and it's like
Right.
you had JLA and we had the Titans, we had Teen Titans, we had Legion of Superheroes, we had multiple Superman books, we had multiple Green Lantern books. Like when we had, and again we had a lot of Batman books then too.
Oh yeah.
But you have all of these pieces, all of these eras of DC that are at the same time and they're working with each other. Those are the times for me as a reader. Those are always my favorite times in
Yeah.
DC. You know, we've talked before. Like you go back to the early '90s, and I know we've talked before where it's like when Tim Drake was coming, and then there was Bart and Connor and Cassie. We had all these new
Yeah.
characters. John Paul coming, like you had all these parts, and then Kyle Rayner. It's like you
Yeah.
had all of these new characters getting introduced, and at the same time as there was, and then you gradually had like this added importance of the JSA. You look at something like Jack Knight and Starman coming, and then Stargirl. And it's like all of these things are adding to the mythology,
Right.
and it's but in a way that shows you that those things from the past mattered. Like Jack Knight and Stargirl, particularly, are two characters that really show you that all of that previous stories, all the generational history stuff, that stuff really does matter. And it's like I know we're kind of going around a way to get to those points in some ways. Obviously, killing the Justice League is a weird way for us to get there. But it goes back to what we said before. It's like I have to be noisy. I gotta like get your attention somehow to be
Yeah.
like, this is big and crazy, and then it's like, but this is actually about this. It really is about legacy and why legacy matters. I mean, that's why it's like I've talked about that a few times where it's like Crisis on Infinite Earths is about the multiverse. Really, it is about the multiverse in the day, and that's why page one is the shot of the multiverse. It's the birth of it, and then it's like you look at Infinite Crisis, and Crisis is a story about Superman, right? It's a Superman story at the end of the day, and that's why Superman's on page one.
Right.
That's why our page one is about the birth of sidekicks. It's the birth of legacy in the DCU because we had stuff before, right? But
Yeah.
the idea that Dick Grayson was taking on this responsibility, this oath to Batman, is really the beginning of, to me at least, it's the beginning of the legacy of the DCU. It's when everything starts falling into place after
Yeah.
that, and that's why I wanted to start there. And like that scene of them lighting the candle in the dark, that is incredibly important for the whole book. But that was what I wanted from that. That's why we start there. And I'm hoping that people see that as they're reading this. That's what this is about. Is about showing where all of these characters, from characters that we've known for the last 80 years of DC history, are just as important as some of the characters that are a year old.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about the DCU is at its best, and all these pieces are playing together, but it's also growing. It needs to keep growing. If it
Yeah.
doesn't keep growing, it will become stagnant, and we don't want that. We want to keep growing, but I don't think you can have it grow if you ignore the root. It's like
Mm.
I was talking about this with somebody else where I was like, it's like planting a seed, and it's that seed is in the dark. You got to water it, and then eventually it will grow. But you have to keep letting that seed grow. But if you go to that root and you cut it off, the rest of it will not. Right? It will die.
Yeah.
So it is a relationship. You have to have both. You have to have the root, and you have to have it continue to grow. Right? And so uh, I don't get too lost into gardening because somebody who's a gardener will come in and be like, well, actually,
Yeah.
like, but I think that's what DC is, and that's what this is about. Like, it's not about, it's not about the future state Justice League characters coming in to replace anybody. It's not about that. It is about all of these pieces operating together. And then on a meta level, it's about all these pieces working together to make a better DC. On a story level, on a deep down of the story, it's about all those characters working together to fight the end, right? To fight the darkness, to fight destruction and death, and fight Pariah and an army, and then to fight Deathstroke and his army. And it's like,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of other moving pieces, but that's really what it all is to me. Like I love DC Comics, and I've been reading DC Comics pretty much my whole life, and it was always like one of my dreams to work at DC Comics, and now here I am. So it's like when I was working on Flash, I was like, okay, I have these things I need to say about Flash. These
Yeah.
are the pieces I got to say about Flash. And when I'm working with Damian or Robin, I'm like, these are the things I want to say about Damian. When it comes to Dark Crisis, it's much more about like, this is me saying something about DC Comics, uh, and particularly sidekicks, because I think
Yeah.
sidekicks are one of the things that make DC unique, and it's a
Yeah.
part of DNA to have sidekicks, to have the partners, to have the legacy characters. You know, the family is always growing, right? Like Batman, who is this supposed loner,
Mm-hmm.
has the biggest family in comics.
Yep.
So it's about, it's about growing those
Yeah.
pieces. Superman's family, Green Lantern, Flashes, Wonder Woman, Aquaman. It is part of. I think that. I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's a part of DC, right? Like, is these families keep growing, and we get new
Yeah.
versions. We get this, we get the cool sidekicks, and you get the new partners. Yeah,
Well, with growth, you get like everyone gets a favorite, right? Because like everybody has a
yeah,
favorite Flash, everybody has a favorite member of the Bat family, everybody has a favorite Lantern, everybody has a favorite
yeah,
like
yeah.
Titan. Like the more you add, the more inclusive it gets. I like to, you know, I make fun of Flash a little bit because it's like, oh, he's one quarter of Superman's powers, cool. But on the other element, no, he's actually faster, and I'm just
He's
razzling you.
faster.
I'm
He's
razzling you a little bit,
faster. That's a whole
but
other conversation for a whole other
it is.
day.
But, but one of the things that I think is endearing about the Flash, because it's like the Flash family, right? It's like, "Oh, you're all fast." It's like, "Oh," but they're so inclusive, and so they're always so jubilant. They're like, "Oh, what can you do? Go fast? Well, guess what? You're on the family now, man. Welcome to the team." Like, "All right, yeah." Like,
Yeah, yeah,
whereas it's like, "Oh, if you like, there's no other power set where it's like, oh, you can do, you can fight. Well, what the hell? You have 17 different groups. If you're a speedster, you're in the family." And it's
yeah.
like a
Someone should do a story about
microcosm.
that. Like, they find out about somebody out there who's running really fast, and then Barry's like, "Let's go find them and bring them in."
Right, exactly, and like, and he's like, I don't want to join your running group. You're
Well, that was kind of Max Mercury, though. Like,
yeah,
Max Mercury was like, "I'm perfectly content working a toll booth. Like,
yes,
I have no, I'm totally cool. You guys do what you're doing. I'll be over here." And then that's when,
yeah, but then
Jay and
he needed
Johnny
a
are like, "No, no, no, come on." Like,
right. Well,
yeah,
but I
yeah,
think
yeah.
Max came into his own when he became a mentor. And it was
Well,
like
yeah, when he got stuck with Bart.
when he got stuck with Bart, exactly.
Yeah, when
But
he
yeah,
became this father figure character, and I think, he really grew as a character from that. But that goes to the idea of these families growing.
right,
I mean,
right, and
it's
that's what it is.
fascinating
It's
to watch.
it's inclusivity.
Well, it's fascinating to watch, like, Barry Allen dies in Christ on Infinite Earths, right? He dies in '85.
Yeah,
Um, by the time you get to the early '90s, you have this Flash family that just keeps growing,
yeah,
and it's like you have Wally, and you have Jesse, and you have Jay, and you have Johnny, and you have Bart that shows up.
yep.
It's like you have all these things, and then Excess is there, and it's like this thing keeps on growing and growing and growing and growing, and it's like, uh, I don't know. I find that interesting that so much cool stuff can come from death in the DCU.
That's true. Oh, you just brought it all together, man. Uh, Well, I wanted to wrap up with just a thought that I'm sharing with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
audience,
yeah,
which is just, honestly, I know we talked mostly about like this event and how it's coming and you should
yeah,
buy it
yeah.
and stuff like that. But the reason why I even wanted to entertain the idea of like, let's sell this event is because there's
Sure.
like, I hear the audience and they're just like,
Mhm.
there's this hunger and this desire, like from some who are disaffected. They're like, like I don't really care. Like when it's so easy to fall off, and I don't really care. I'm not really getting to the comic book store. There's not a lot of hype right now. Not everybody's excited. And then there's the new folk who don't even know. Their parents didn't drag them to the comic book store to buy
Mhm.
to buy 3 copies of Superman's death, right? Because they're like, well, this is important. This is a big seminal moment.
I mean, I was the
Um,
one that was like waiting in the rain for it with my dad. My dad was like, "What are we doing here?"
Yeah, well, see, my folks
Yeah.
read about it in the newspaper. They were like, "Oh, Superman's dying. We got to go to the comic book store." And I was like, "You never want to take me to the comic book store. What are we
Oh man, that's
doing?"
funny. No,
Because I love the
I
comic
was
book
already
store,
the
but they did
kid
not want to
going.
drive me there.
I
But
was already the kid going every week, so that was
nice.
part of
Oh,
my
so was
thing. But
I, but
yeah.
I was dependent on a ride.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I think this and more are it. Like these are
Mhm.
if you're looking for an event to get you in, and when I say event, I don't mean like the event called Dark Crisis, but like the event of event comics, or if the event of the pageantry of going to a comic book store, and and getting excited about something, getting on the ground floor of something that's
Yeah,
happening,
yeah,
that's going to seismically change the DC universe, or at the very least define what it is and what it means to be a fan of DC.
yeah,
This is it. Like, it's okay to celebrate joy, even if it's just
yeah,
in something as like, as superficial as killing the Justice League, but like there's depth there. I'm not saying it's like,
yeah. Well,
you
that's
know,
what I'm saying too. Is that like I always hate to be like enjoy the ride a little bit. You
right,
know,
but like it's a
it
ride
is.
and you
Yeah. Well, I've always said this to people who've come to me at conventions and have been very concerned for years. This has been going on. Like,
yeah,
and they'll come to me and they're really worried about something. And again, it's like I said before, it's like I'm at the end of the book a lot of times with
right.
these stories, right? Like I know what's going to happen. So it's hard for me sometimes, but the thing I always tell them, and I'm sure we've talked about before too, is that like it is a roller coaster. Like you are getting on this roller coaster. You know it's going to have some ups. You know it's going to have some downs, and it's going to be scary at times. But at the end, you're going to have fun. You got to like let yourself have fun on the ride a little bit. You know, like if
Yeah.
you're getting on to the ride, you got to kind of know what you're getting yourself into, and just have some fun with it. It's going to be intense at times. Um, but try to enjoy the ride. Like if you love comics, you like these characters, you like these stories, like just come with us. Like we're gonna have some fun. Like
Right.
it's gonna be scary sometimes, but let's have some fun. Like scary is good. Scary is good sometimes. It's good. Let's go. And that's really what this that it's like, you know, when people are skeptical of it, I'm it is hard sometimes to win people over, and that is part of it, even the meta-ness of the story. We kind of deal with that a little bit, but you know, it's kind of like, listen, like the most I can tell you is just come with us and just have some fun. You know that we're trying to tell something that says something. We're trying to tell a story that says something about the DCU.
Right.
And if you are a fan of the DCU, there will be things here for you. So just without getting too into spoilers, sometimes I wish I could. I wish I could just be like, "Yo, this is everything that happens." just
Right.
go. Sometimes I'm excited about it. You know, I mean, I'll
Yeah.
get caught up and I'll be like, "Oh, this happens, this happens, this happens." Like there are times I'm like, oh, I'll explain with DC. We'll talk a little bit about it, and then I'll just go on these rants of like, well, here's what happens in everything, and
Right.
I give it all away because I get too excited about it. But that's what I'm hoping people can see. It's like it's funny sometimes. I'm kind of like, yo, like look around my office. I'm a big old DC nerd. like,
Exactly. Like, trust me, man. I know what I'm talking. At the
yeah,
very least,
listen,
like
like
I'm not gonna lead you astray. We're not going on a
yeah, I'm
on a
not the
trail.
outsider that doesn't know and doesn't care. Like
Doesn't
I do
care.
know and I do care. And it's
Yeah.
like, and I hope sometimes people will know that I do care. And it's like I'm trying to tell you, like we're going for a ride. Like enjoy the ride. Like let's go see the show, and have some fun with it. And yeah, and just know that we're talking about the stuff that you love,
Right.
and we'll get there. We'll get there. So but you gotta kind of come with us. I know it's kind of weird. I'm like the Pied Piper over here, but
Right?
it's like,
Yeah, but well, because and I think people are skeptical because like they're so discerning now about what media they consume because they have like a gazillion options, and it's just like if you like comics, you're like it's gonna
yeah.
be
Well, that goes to the thing we were saying before, though. It's like, and this is what led us to do the story we're telling, the way we're telling it, and start here. It's like
yeah
we've been telling us a bunch of pieces of this across the DCU for the last year and putting these pieces on the table. But this particular part, this big piece of it, we had to start here because we got your attention. Like, I did see this person talk about this one time where they were like, this was the first time they had talked about DC or the first time they had talked about Justice League. And it's like, well, all right, I got your attention now. Come
exactly
with me. Come with me.
yeah
And that's what all this stuff is. And it's like, I'm just hoping that, all the work that we're doing, all the work of the creators, editorial, like, I think one of the lessons I've learned over the last 5 years, 6 years, really, since I've been back at DC, is that like DC Comics is never one person. It's a team of people. It's a lot of us working together to try to do good stories. Just try to get people to be excited about these characters and these stories. I hope people can see that, and they can see that we care, and that they come with us again, like come with us for the ride. But, and I'm gonna go back to the whole thing of like good things can come from death in the DCU, which I've talked about this a lot. It's like we have Kyle
yeah
because what happened with Hal. We have Tim because what happened with
force yeah oh Jason four Supermen yeah
yeah yeah
four beloved characters
yeah.
out of the
There's
Death
a lot of
Superman.
there's a lot of pieces that came out of these kinds of stories, and that's part of what the story is about. So
Yeah
I'm hoping we can end here. Just
Yeah,
people like recognize that what we're doing, we're good things that come from death in the DCU, and
there we
you'll see.
go.
Yeah,
Cool.
I know that sounds a little morbid, but
But in comics, it ain't permanent, so it's okay to it's okay to dwell in there for a
well,
little
it's
while.
that quote though, right? Like, death is only the beginning.
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh, I'm shocked that wasn't the opener.
I know. We should leave it there. All right, so we should go. And I have to get back to work. I feel like my phone's ringing. I
Oh
bet you I'm
yeah.
gonna look over my email inbox, and it's gonna be a bunch of stuff I have to do today.
Yep. Well,
It's
thanks a
gonna be
lot
like
for
it's
hanging out with
Monday,
us.
work.
Yeah. Yeah, it is Monday. That's true. Listen, folks, we'll see you
Yeah.
guys next time with another episode. But of course, when is Dark Crisis #1 on sale?
Dark Crisis goes on sale on June 7th. Right now we're in the window for FOC for the Road to Dark Crisis and Shadow War Omega.
Yep.
You should definitely check out the free comic book day book that's coming out, the Dark Crisis Zero.
Yeah.
And yeah, pre-order Dark Crisis 1 with your local comic book store.
Right, because I didn't get my Death of Justice League, ladies and gentlemen. You better pre-order your Dark Crises.
Yeah, my
before...
shop was out of it too, so that was a whole thing.
Yeah,
I have copies here. I have like a box of them right here, but
yes,
they're my copies.
but they're yours.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we'll
All
see
right,
you guys
cool.
next
All right.
time. Thanks a lot,
Yeah.
and
Thanks, guys.
we'll see you next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe as always. So long.